The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. An awakening experience is often the absolute opposite of liberating. An awakening means that you're becoming aware of something that you have not been aware before. You're waking up to something that before was dormant. And as mystical as it sounds, and as difficult it might be to point to if you haven't gone through an experience like this, when you do eventually go through such a radical shift in your perception, you are likely confronted with a lot of existential terror. Your perception of yourself, your sense of identity shifts, and it can become extremely concrete. It's not some loose sense of, wow, I am now becoming more conscious or aware, but it's seeing how much of life is fueled by lies and pain. You might suddenly notice that all the self-talk that you've been doing in your head was never actually meaningful, and it was just a self-torture mechanism with no real purpose or end in sight. Or you might look at your body and realize that what you're calling me is this animal that can get sick and decay and be humiliated and abandoned, and that with 100% certainty you will die. You might realize that the desires you thought were yours were inherited from your parents, culture, or trauma, or even envy and fear. And then there's this rage that you can come in contact with, where all of your life and all of existence beyond your own life, for that matter, seems like a giant mistake. And the immensity of the mistake is where you have to wonder, is existence somehow a mistake? What you can experience in the state is you can sense that suffering of other people suddenly isn't that abstract anymore. It is not somebody else's pain. It's just consciousness being burned from another angle. The clear look at reality for how it is actually like kind of forces you to look at it with pure terror, because terror is such a big part of reality, and that's exactly what we do not want to experience. Therefore, we push it away and ignore everything that is related to that existential fear. If you were ignorant about all of the stuff before, then becoming aware of it is the opposite of liberating. It is looking at a world and seeing that everything is pretty fucked up, and that everybody is kind of forced to live in the consequences of mistakes of the past. This works on the individual level and the worldly terrors of life. So if you are alive, then you kind of have to come to terms with the fact that you can break your legs, get depressed, or be enslaved, or burn in a fire. And from a higher consciousness perspective, you might say, you notice that even if these things don't happen to you and you're relatively safe, if it is in fact the case that reality just recycles experiences, like the wheel of Samsara in Buddhism, right? Like this endless cycle of reincarnation where things just appear without any apparent reason. And then people have to go through this, kind of prison planet idea, where you just have to kind of find out how you get towards the truth and free yourself from this wheel of endless suffering. And it's not that it is just about you now, right? It's about millions, if not billions of beings every day that are forced to live in an existence like this. So this expanded sense of selfhood implies more empathy. And this empathy is an existential gut punch. Because once your boundaries dissolve, it is not just about feeling random empathy for random people, but you become existentially very anxious because it seems like that what you are seeing is not something that should be accepted, that there's something that should be done against the conditions that have made the world into what they are now. And it is not abstract. It is seen as something that really matters. Like your pain matters when you feel it, right? It is not just something that you can brush away. And if your sense of self has dissolved in this process, then there can come a feeling of cosmic guilt, like as if you did this somehow. And you might be projecting your own sense of guilt from your own life towards, some cosmical or universal guilt. But you might also just look or think about the perspective of an imaginary God and think, if a God has created this, then he did a giant mistake. I would describe this feeling personally as if you are suddenly becoming aware of the infinite creation that is part of existence, and you are the thing that made everything exist in the first place. Because you are what existence is embodied in a way, right? Like you are the thing that exists, therefore you cannot really be separated from it. And then some people through these experiences can then have the feeling that they are responsible for the world they have created, and they feel a sense of divine regret. Usually, when you are in a mode of divine regret, you feel like you have accidentally created hell. And this is where all of this spiritual awakening stuff moves from this liberating story of beauty and infinite bliss and endless love to a cosmical horror story. And it feels more than just real. Like when you're actually in it, then there's just no denying about what you can see, because you see reality for what it is actually like. Maybe not with the narratives about Godhood and all of this, stuff that can become a bit crazy sometimes, but when you look at how much pain exists within each human being and each living being, and how conditioned we have each other to manipulate and lie and treat each other cruelly and not empathize with each other and just abuse till no end for our own personal gain, and looking at the sheer amount of it, then it feels like a reasonable conclusion to say that this was a mistake. And then philosophy, spirituality, all tries to wrap itself around this disaster and tries to find a way to justify the accident. And oftentimes, as a response, the ego then says, well, it's all meaningless. It becomes nihilistic because it is so overwhelmed with the sheer intensity that is being implied with reality that nihilism becomes a very common protection mechanism. Because if nothing really matters, I don't have to keep looking at it. And if I don't have to keep looking at it, I can be ignorant of it, be in my own little bubble, and pretend that all of this is not the case. Now, here things get a bit confusing for people because it is often said that ignorance is bliss. And in some sense, if you were all the time looking at suffering of other people, then you're clearly not helping anybody. You're just bringing yourself into a state of madness because you cannot accept that suffering is a thing that exists within itself. But most of the time, when people ignore suffering of other people as like a principal thing, like I just don't want to be bothered by what is happening to others, then what is really happening most of the time is that you're not looking at the pain within yourself. So you don't have room to expand your awareness and look what's going on because you don't have the space within yourself to empathize even with yourself. And you can feel this with other people too, how much they've integrated their own pain, because the more they've integrated their own pain, the more they will respond positively to when you give them good news. And you maybe notice when you talk to a friend and you talk about some good thing that has happened to you, if they are kind of like in a bad mood or they genuinely have like their own troubles, they cannot genuinely feel happy for you. They might say that, but they don't actually feel it. But if somebody feels very comfortable in their own skin, And they generally will reflect your happiness back, and then it becomes this mirror effect. So you cannot really take the responsibility of the entire cosmos onto your own ego, because it will just cause you to have this destabilizing mania where you feel like you are some sort of responsible for this this madness. But the feeling of anger and frustration and sadness with the cosmos does in fact point to deep inner wisdom. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is this idea of the angry entity. They are angry Buddhist deities, and they clearly do not look content with the state of things. They use their anger as a force of transformation, and they show that the anger is a fuel for compassion. And these creatures are important in the mythology because they show that even gods can experience righteous anger. Even gods can be disappointed with their own delusions. Even gods can hate existence. This anger is required in these traditions as an object to move through in order for you to find enlightenment. Because all the egoic conditionings that people have accumulated often require a lot of force to pierce through. And a lot of this nihilistic, unempathizing, ignorant way of being is suppressing down anger. It is not admitting to which extent you actually hate yourself. And by this hatred, you create a fundamental split between your sense of being, your soul, so to say, and all the causes and effects of everything that has happened in the entire universe that brought you here. If there's a sense of hatred for your conditionings, like if you dislike everything that brought you into the situation that you are in right now, you automatically will have some existential resentment towards life, because you are the causes and effects that brought you into this situation. Every single movement of every atom in the galaxy has brought you here. And then when you are angry with yourself and angry with all the mistakes that you've done and then projected towards the universe, it is this clear construction that is saying, I do not accept what is happening, and there is some force, likely righteous anger, or the sense of fierceful compassion that wants to pierce through the system and look at it honestly. And it requires to notice everything you in fact do not like about this world, do not like about yourself, and do not like about the nature of your own existence. If you push it away, you cannot become the wrathful deity that pierces through all the pain. It is not right that these emotions like anger are beneath you, because in a lot of these like esoteric contexts, everybody preaches light and love and well-being, but ignores all the anger that lies oftentimes underneath it. There's this habit to pretend that everything is fine and everything is okay and you can deal with everything. And I suspect that a lot of the anger that people experience is also a bit of fear of themselves, fear of their own potential, really, fear of what they could do, both as evil and also as good. So when awareness of all of these things expands faster than you can metabolize it, if you have to see too much of the nature of existence at the same time, then it usually happens that you start to feel like you cannot possibly handle all of existence, because your own ego is just so overwhelmed by the boundless acceptance of all of reality that the only reaction that makes sense to it is deny any of it exists, deny that any of it matters, and put itself into its small shell. And this shell can only be broken through generally strong emotions, and to look at the hatred inside that wants to cause division. The ego cannot metabolize universal compassion, so it turns awakening into an accusation. It is something that is being done to it, and it is hating that it is being done to it. And this is true for all manifestations of life. When I had my, let's say, dark night of the soul experience, which was, truly hellish. Like I never knew that the psyche could create so much existential pain when I was actually physically safe. And when I was confronted with, the sense that everything that exists is basically outside of my control, and I must move through it no matter what. There was such a sense of resentment for duality. I didn't like that there were separate objects in the first place. And by this sense of separate objectness, I felt like I wanted to fight against it. And the sense of fighting against it created the feeling of being trapped in hell. Now, every single atom in my conscious experience was perceived as a sort of demonic force. And I don't believe in demons, and I don't really believe in God in this like classical mythological sense. But in this moment, the experience was identical to being some soul of consciousness, being aware of existence as a thing, and being 100% certain that it was a mistake and it would have been better to never have existed in the first place. And this is a very, very dark experience to be in, especially if you then reject that this amount of dislike for existence is even within you. The thing is that if you suddenly see that none of it was chosen and you're still vulnerable in this sort of inherited world, then the only thing left to do is to experience all of the horror, experience all of the anger, and let yourself move through what you don't want to experience. Now, for the ego, this sounds extremely stupid because it removes the sense of control, it removes the sense of agency, and it just wants to hate even more or fight more against it. But I hope that the way I've laid out this topic to you shows you why this sense that you could resist anything in the first place is what creates the sense of nightmare being. Because you're fighting against an immovable object, which is the current reality you're in right now. You have the ability to change your behavior, change your level of awareness, change your level of perception, and through emotions, like through righteous anger, change the future. But it cannot happen now. It is something that moves through you, through time and space. And it is fueled by the desire to look at what is actually going on, even the parts that you don't like about yourself. So you cannot add some nice spiritual belief on top of your life and then hope that all of the stuff that is ruminating underneath will magically disappear. This is not spirituality. This is classically called spiritual bypassing. And to, not make it too abstract or too philosophical, it is just the fact that anything can happen to you that must be accepted, and that millions of beings are going through a ton of experiences every single day, and you are not separate from them. You are the freedom that made this possible in the first place. To see all of this clearly without collapsing in just fear and terror, without building new walls that you kind of refuse to move through, it is very helpful to have a place and a space where you can understand what is going on in your mind, be open and sincere about what is going on in your mind and what you care about, and then to use this and use the emotions underneath it to build something better. I am currently building a space precisely for that, and the exact announcements to how you can get into the space will be announced in my Substack. You can find in the link below. To be awake and to be alive is this constant existential struggle until you really have woken up. Because a lot of this trajectory towards full existential freedom and full existential acceptance requires multiple stages of awakening where the experience is just not pleasant. And the amount of pleasure that can be experienced through life can only be found at the other side of the thing. Because for somebody who is depressed, like, of course you don't know how it is like to not be depressed and how much joyful life can be. It can only happen once this process is moved through. And the sad feeling is always the sense that nothing will ever mend this. Nothing will ever make me be able to go through this. And then, you put yourself into the shell and don't want to keep looking because what you are looking at feels just so insurmountable to accept. Because if you are, in fact, all of existence, then the amount of acceptance required here is not just some small like psychological droplet. It is truly the acceptance with the personal and finite and the infinite and cosmical. And to see this entire structure for how things are actually like and not how you want it to be like. This is what makes it so immense to go through an experience like this. And it is very difficult for most ordinary normal life experience to relate to such a shift in awareness. If God wasn't able to hate its own creation, then he would not be all powerful. If the question of evil is something that you are struggling with a lot and you want to understand how is evil allowed in a world like this when things are supposedly one and whole and good, then I made a video about this that you can find right here.